Hi boys and girls. Today I'm going to read you some stories from my favorite book of fairy tales, Cinderella and Other Stories Retold by Jean Cap. We'll start with Puss in Boots. There was once a young man in a very sad state of mind. His father had recently died, leaving him only a cat. One of his brothers had inherited the father's mill and the other a donkey. If my brothers work together, they'll earn an honest living, thought the young man. But how will I make use of this cat? Easier than you think, master, said the cat, who had been only half asleep. Give me my way, and I'll promise to make you a fortune. I'll need a sack and a pair of boots, and then you'll see. The young man knew that his cat was a very clever fellow and decided to trust him. Puss got his boots and a sack as well. Thus equipped, Puss went out to hide in a briar patch that was simply alive with rabbits. There was a little grain in the bottom of his sack, and he had a shrewd plan in mind. He lay, eyes half shut, pretending to be dead, until he saw a foolish rabbit slip into his sack to eat the grain. He shut the sack quickly and put an end to the unlucky rabbit. An hour later, he presented himself to the king. "Sire," said Puss with his most exquisite bow, "in accordance with the orders of my master, the Marquis of Carabas, I offer you this fine rabbit from his game reserve." There was, of course, no Marquis of Carabas. Puss had invented the title just to impress people with his master's seeming nobility. The king was naturally flattered by the gift. He sent its donor thousands of kind remarks along with his most generous thanks. The next day, Puss took his sack and went hunting again. This time he caught 2 pheasants. He took them at once to the king as a present from the Marquis of Carabas. The king thanked him again and ordered that Puss be given a magnificent feast. From time to time, Puss brought to the court game that, said Puss, his master had hunted. The king and his courtiers came to know quite well the name of the Marquis of Carabas. Puss most certainly knew what he was doing. One day he heard that the king expected to go for a drive along the river. He suggested to his master that he bathe at a certain spot and follow all of Puss's instructions exactly. Scarcely was the so-called Marquis well wet when the royal party came along. The cat immediately began to call, "Help! Help! The Marquis of Carabas is drowning!" Hearing the hubbub, the king stuck his royal head out of the carriage window. He recognized Puss, who had brought him so many presents, and gave orders to rush to the aid of the poor Marquis. While he was being helped from the river, Puss told the monarch that thieves had stolen his master's clothes while he bathed. The palace officer of the wardrobe was promptly set off in order to return with a set of rich clothes befitting the Marquis of Carabas, which he did at once. He looked so splendid when he put them on that His Majesty treated him with especial courtesy. As for the king's daughter, the princess fell in love right off and gazed at him with great rapture. The king then insisted that the Marquis join him in his private carriage and share the pleasures of the drive. Puss went on ahead of them, and he met some farmers cutting grain in the field and said to them, "If you do not tell whoever asks thee that these fields belong to the Marquis of Carabas, I will have you ground into mincemeat." The farmers naturally dreaded such a fate. Thus, when the king asked in whose fields they were working, they replied, like a trained choir, "Sire, these fields belong to the Marquis of Carabas." "A superb piece of property," nodded the king to the supposed Marquis. Puss, well ahead of the king and his party, saw some harvesters. "Ho there," he called. "If you do not proclaim that these fields belong to the Marquis of Carabas, I will have you ground into mincemeat." The frightened harvesters told the king when he asked that the length and breadth of their harvest belonged personally to the Marquis of Carabas. Puss threatened every farmer for miles around and ordered them to give the same answer, so that the king was astonished at the richness of the Marquis's holding. At length, Puss came to a castle where lived the richest of all ogres. He entered it and told the ogre that he did not wish to pass by without paying his respects. "For," Puss went on, "I've heard that you can change yourself into all kinds of animals." "Quite so," said the ogre proudly. "For instance, I can be a lion." And with just a couple of magic words, the ogre did indeed change into an enormous lion. The cat was terrified. He wanted to scurry up the drain pipe, but he soon thought of a better way out of the problem. "Ah, yes," said Puss. "You are big and strong. It's fairly easy for you to become a powerful beast. But if you could change yourself into some tiny creature, a mouse now, or a rat, for instance, that would be extraordinary." "Not extraordinary at all," the vain ogre answered. He said some mysterious words and became a mouse. Puss was ready and waiting. He leapt on the mouse and devoured him. Then he licked his lips and went to the drawbridge to wait for the royal carriage. When he saw it, he cried, "Welcome to the castle of the Marquis of Carabas, your Majesty." The amazed king asked to be shown everything. In one huge room, a sumptuous meal had been prepared, quite as if the king had been expected. In truth, it was the ogre who had planned the feast for dinner with friends that day. Around the table, the king, the princess, and our supposed marquis had a gay meal. They ate and drank with such delight that after half an hour, the king said confidentially, "I should not be at all displeased to have a son-in-law like you, Marquis." His daughter, hearing these words, appeared to agree. Her eyes brightened to show how pleased she was. The cat smiled into his whiskers. So the Marquis of Carabas married the daughter of the king, and they were very happy and had lots of children, all of whom learned to respect the cat as a lord and to love him as a friend. The end.